Vice Mayor. Mikey, how are we on our schedule?
You're 15 minutes early. You might want to start the Strategic Planning Committee.
Yeah, we might need it there.
Yeah.
Not very encouraging, but yeah. Governor Martin, do you want to go ahead and start the strategic planning?
Give them a gift of a few minutes.
Okay, we will now start the Strategic Planning Committee, 15 minutes early, and we'll end early as well. Which will take you, right?
Make a wager on that?
Mike, you want to call the roll?
Sure. This continuing from yesterday afternoon, Vice Chair, Mr. Rood.
Here.
Mr. Colson.
Here.
Mrs. Frost. Here. Mr. Hosseini. Mr. Perez. Here. Dr. Yost.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. As we ended the meeting yesterday, after spending about 4 hours listening to presentations from the 3 universities, my charge to the Strategic Planning Committee was to think about overnight all of the presentations and the issues that were discussed and presented. A number of board members have had a lot of concerns. Is this the right time to approve these dental programs? And as I mentioned yesterday, initially it was going to be an information-only meeting, but then I wanted to make sure that you had the opportunity to weigh in on the logical next steps as we continue down this journey. So I hope you've had an opportunity to collaborate and think about what the next steps would be. And there were a number of options that we kind of threw out yesterday. So my goal this morning, as we have a relatively brief, maybe discussion in terms of the next steps, I would like to hear from the committee members in terms of what are your desires in regards to the presentations we heard yesterday. And I'm going to look to my co-chair, John Rood, to start the dialogue. And then we'll ask each of the committee members to weigh in, and then we'll come to an agreement.
First of all, Mr. Chairman, I want to clarify, vice chair, not co-chair. You're trying to drag me into this.
Collaboration.
Yeah. And I also want to clarify that we all left last night and did a lot of soul searching, but not a lot of collaborating. So I want to make sure that was clear. You know, in thinking about this, you know, I came away, I'm still concerned about our fiscal challenges that we all have. I'm also confused about the need. You know, we listened to one report on the need, and then we heard some very conflicting information, and I think from my perspective, I don't understand it, and I need to go back and spend a lot more time understanding the report that we had, the material that we were presented, and see how that relates to mortality and growth in the state. And the third thing that I thought about was the fact that I still don't understand how these 3 proposals work, especially the 2 that are a little more creative. I don't get it. And we clearly did not have enough time to engage in a long discussion to try to peel away the onion to get to really what was the underlying structure of these proposals. So I'm a little, well, and then also let me add, my feeling is we didn't clearly post this for action. The idea was is informational. And I know we have the ability to take action, but I'm a little bit uncomfortable when we don't post something and say to the universities we are going to say yes or no at this point. With all that said, at this point to give this a vote for up and down is a little troubling to me because I don't, at least from my perspective, I don't have an answer to these issues. So what I would propose is that we take no action, which would give us time to pursue one of two options: either individually meet with the universities to understand what exactly is being presented and to take more time to look into the report relating to demand, or as a group, we reconvene in a month or so and charge the universities to come back and to provide, and clearly without spending more consultant time and on, but just to explain in more detail and give us more of an informal environment to ask questions and dig deeper into what these presentations are about. So my recommendation would be to take no action and to pursue either individual meetings or another group meeting of your committee, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Governor Colson.
Well, I would agree with our vice chair that we should not take any action today. And you know, if I was compelled to vote right now, I would probably vote against all three of these. And I would for a variety of different reasons, but a lot of which have to do with the economy, and a lot of have to do with need and things like that. But I think people are working hard. People are trying to become collaborative, treat people. So I think we should take no action and see if anybody, after they wants to come back and educate us and convince us differently. That's where I am.
Okay, moving on down, Governor Perez.
I agree with Co-Chair Rude on his approach, and I want to be clear, Mr. Chair, or Mr. Co-Chair, as the case may be. I'm amenable if we wanted to, at our next board meeting, come in a day early, on a Tuesday, if you will, and have a strategic planning committee and review. I certainly think we should, in the interim, meet with those universities that want to meet with us and have the conversation. But I think we should give it the look that it deserves and not rush the ball today. So I concur with what's been said.
Okay. Governor Frost.
I concur with what was just said, that we probably should meet a day early and listen to all this again. I do think we had a lot of information, though. I really do. I think of all the proposals in the year that I've been on, or year and a quarter that I've been on, we have gotten a lot of letters. We've seen a lot of statistics. So I really do think we have a lot of information. I think the one issue right now is, do we even want to consider the idea that you're going to have one or two or three universities working together? I mean, that's a different ballpark. So that we haven't heard from, other than they now want to get together. So I would concur that we would wait. On the other hand, I think we all have to think about the budget, how much money we have, how our buildings are falling down, and really, are we a social agency? I don't believe we are a social agency in this area. I know we had a lot of statistics from various organizations. Dentists are retiring, but let me tell you, there are dentists all over the United States who want to work and live in Florida. So there is a balance to that. We've seen a lot right now. If I had to vote today, I probably would vote no for all three, based on the fact that we don't have any money. We really don't. And I know that some of you have big donors who are coming in with $10 million. I just wonder what the motive is for that person who's giving the $10 million to, if he doesn't give it to us as the state public university system, he might go to a private area. Why? So I think we need to look into that, and maybe if someone's so generous with $10 million, we ought to consider what else would this gentleman and his businesses give to the university. I'm not sure, maybe just your medical school. So I would concur with what's been said. We should wait, come in a day earlier, listen to again the proposals, and then make a decision. But if I had to vote right now, I'd probably vote no.
Governor Yost.
I would concur with the thread of the discussion as it's gone on. I'm not convinced that the outcome of the vote would be any different with more information. But that said, we certainly gave a lot of feedback yesterday. I would hope that we'd see some response to that feedback and any new information that we might see. So I think the right thing is to defer.
Very good. Okay, John. Okay, now we've heard Governor Hussaini is not here. I want to hear from the Strategic Planning Committee members first. Now we'll go back and for other members, and we start with John Temple. John?
Yeah, I think, I don't know if this is a request to you, Frank, or a request to Chairman Parker, but I think it's only fair to the three universities that have made presentations. We've been studying this for a long time, that during our board meeting, that you get the same kind of input. That we be allowed to give them the same kind of input so we can give them some feedback. So that's my request as a non-member of this committee, but as a board member.
Okay. Governor Stavros, any comments? Okay.
John's comments are well made.
Okay. Governor Long? Okay. Governor Beer?
Only thing I would say is if we did have a vote today, which it apparently we wouldn't, I would vote no on it, on the proposals.
Okay. Governor Parker?
Mr. Chairman, I think that my preference, John, is that since I know this is just a strategic planning committee, but since everybody's almost here, I think the only person, I know Norm isn't here yet, and I see that Maury isn't here, but you almost have the full board. So, my thoughts are that, if there are comments that you'd like to share, that maybe we use this opportunity, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, having non-members of your committee at least making comments at this point, and then we can make a determination about whether it's necessary to address the issue again during the report out from the Strategic Planning Committee. So my preference is that if there are folks who are not on strategic planning who would like to weigh in on how we address this issue, even during the full board meeting, if you make your comments now, and then based upon those comments, I can make some determination about whether, once we receive the report out from the Strategic Planning Committee, whether there's any other action that the board may want to take later today. So please use this time to voice what you'd like to voice, and then we can procedurally see if we're going to make any kind of determination later.
Okay. Moving down, Governor Duncan.
Good morning. I think we did get a lot of information. I've spent a considerable amount of time with each of the institutions. I raised my questions even though I wasn't on the committee yesterday, so thank you for giving me that leeway. And I'm fine with delaying the vote. The one thing I think I would suggest, though, is because these are complicated issues, that if you guys have questions and you think there's information missing, that you would get that to the institutions prior to our November meeting so that we don't get to the meeting and then say, well, we need more information or we need other stuff. I mean, we need to, because I think out of fairness to them and the effort and time they put into it, we need to bring this to a conclusion at our November meeting. And so that would be my suggestion and request, that if there's other information to get to with the staff or get with the institutions so that we got everything we need to move forward.
Governor Yost?
I'd suggest that perhaps some staff analysis might be useful for us as well if we're going to look at this again. That it might be worthwhile to have the staff give us some analysis to assist us.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. Okay. I was just going to say, being the sort of the ringmaster here, if board members have questions and concerns, it would be helpful. It doesn't mean you can't take them directly to the institutions. Obviously, you can do that, but it would also be helpful to let us know what they are so we can help the board prepare for the next conversation on this issue. And I would ask the universities the same thing, that they communicate with us throughout these conversations to make sure that no one is surprised when we do take up this issue in the future. It would be really very helpful. So we can help to orchestrate the conversations, make sure they're moving along, but also make sure everybody knows what the questions are that people are asked to resolve. And I'd appreciate that very much.
Okay. Governor Summers?
I'm sorry, I do have a comment.
Okay.
When I was a young man, I told my father that I wanted to become a lawyer. And he said, son, there are too many lawyers. And my response was, there's always room for a good lawyer. Well, I don't care about how many dentists we have. I'd like to know more about the specialties. I'd like to know about what we are going to be training these young people. As I've said, when I have visions of this dentist, male or female, coming at me with a drill, drilling through my teeth to my jaw to put these implants in, I want to make sure that that dentist knows what he's doing or she's doing. So I think it's great. I'd like to know more about the specialties. I'd like to get more information because I think there's always room for a great dentist.
They managed to drill into your wallet well.
Governor Tilple.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'd like to make some comments and give some feedback. I agree with a lot of my fellow governors who are on your committee that if I had to vote today, I'd vote no. First of all, we had a very comprehensive staff study done. I thought it was very well done. We've had input from a lot of other professional organizations in the dentistry industry that basically says we don't need more dentists, but they're in the wrong places, which I don't think is our job. Just briefly on UCF, clearly all of these things add to economic development and stimulus, and I agree with that. But I think we're taking a big risk, basically 100% leveraging, maybe with a $10 million donation, both the sale lease back of the building, which I think you're going to have a real tough time doing, in spite of the fact that, I accept the fact that you have interest expressed by some developers in doing this. As a developer, I wouldn't do it. Then you're encumbering dollars that we have from your auxiliaries, which bothers me as a policy. That's state money. I don't agree that that's your money. That's state money. We're stewards of state money, just as Norman had said. And who knows where that money might be needed someday, given the state of our economy, which I don't see improving in the near term. And you may have to go to those dollars for some other purpose. On both UCF and FAMU, I agree that this is a public health problem that we have, and that's not our business. So I think the chancellor put it very well. I had written down a lot of things that led to the same, but he kind of nailed it. In terms of University of Florida, if we have an opportunity to raise to market rates, I don't think we're in the professional schools should be in the subsidy business. So if we got an opportunity to raise our rates to market rates and maybe provide money for students that need financial aid to help our diversity issue, I think that ought to be thought about. It's clear that our plant at University of Florida, we got a great school, but our plant's falling apart. And I think we need to fix that first. The other thing I'd ask staff to do, just to be consistent, is some of these projections did have full costing in them. I know UCS, I'm convinced did. I'm not convinced that FAMU did because they didn't include a full G&A allocation to their projections. Also, when it came to FAMU, we're talking about using a lot of state dollars, and we don't have them. So that's my input. I have no problem delaying this. If there's potential for collaboration, I think in the interim, that's great. But I'd just like to give you feedback.
Okay, Governor Robinson and then Governor Tripp.
There is a need to diversify the profession to make sure that we actually have competent professionals who are in rural and underserved areas. We know that's important. One premise that I'd like to at least question is that when high school graduates from underserved and rural areas go to college and graduate. Very seldom do they return to rural and underserved areas. If they do, it's family first, economic second. It's not economic first. And so we could find a way to make that happen. I think that would be great. We have Meharry Medical School, Howard University. I know FAMU's reached out to them to talk. They've been in this business over 80 years, trying to find unique ways of putting competent professionals in rural and underserved areas. And so I know they've walked on that area. And if we can find a way to do that, that would be great. Number two, if private dental schools are actually going to come to the forefront, independent of whether a public school steps to the plate, there's going to be a need met. It may not be the need that some would like, but a need would be met. Third, there's some lessons we can learn from the K-12 sector. We have a tough time trying to find biologists, physicists, and others to come and teach in rural and underserved areas. So we've created plans to attract them to rural and underserved areas, even in some of the tough schools in our suburban areas. And so we should probably look at some of the K-12 sections on what lessons, how do we get K-12 teachers to the right areas. We could probably do the same thing for some of our medical professionals. So look forward to more dialogue and debate, and would like to talk more to school leaders.
Governor Tripp.
He pointed out my comment. As I thought last night when I was home, we seem to be negative on the idea that the private sector was coming in. We know Lake Erie College is coming, and there's possibility of another. I think at this point in time, given our dental situation, we should be encouraging the private sector to partner with the public sector. I don't think more public dollars are necessarily the answer to the issues we have. And I was a little taken aback that we seem to be pushing that away or as something we weren't favoring. And I would hope UCF would consider, if they know somebody who's already there, trying to bring them into that park. You already have a private with Burnham, so it's not like you haven't set the stage, and I think we ought to be thinking about trying to partner in that type of area.
Okay, very good. Any comments from either Florida A&M, President Ammons, President Batchen, and or President Hitt?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Florida A&M University looks forward to further discussions on what we believe is a tremendous problem in this state. So we look forward to meeting with members of the Strategic Planning Committee to talk about the partnerships, the collaboration, and how those will prove that this approach that we are proposing is a cost-effective model to put the university system in a position where it can impact the lives of people in this state, especially in rural and underserved areas. This has been a role of universities for centuries to positively impact the lives of people in their service regions. And we appreciate the opportunity to continue this discussion, and we look forward to it.
Okay, thank you. President Matson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We understand the decision of the committee so far, and we're of course fine with that. The one thing that would help us as we go back to think, it's not clear to me what the board wants. It seems to me they don't want anything. And if there is, I think people are saying this is a public health issue, not an educational issue, that we should look to all sectors, including the private sector, to deal with this. Those are pretty clear signals that I'm taking from the conversation this morning. But if there's something I'm missing that the board would like us to try to focus on before we come back, if we do, maybe you could help me just a little bit.
Certainly. President Hitt.
Well, we appreciate the opportunity to continue the conversation.
Okay.
John has it.
You know, let me just add, my biggest challenge that I have here. If I'm going to vote up or down on something, I ought to be able to articulate the plan. And I still, after reading it, listening to it, I still struggle with the plan. Now, maybe I'm just slow, but there's the contractor aspects of it, the float aspects of it, and I think whether it's a one-on-one or whether it's another group where we just dig a little bit deeper, we owe it to you to understand something before we take action. And that's kind of where I'm coming from on this. So that would be the direction that I would provide. And I do have a procedural question. If we take no action and just agree that we're going to meet, and I like Tico's idea before the next meeting, if we agree to do that, then will it even come up in the full board meeting, or will it just be reported that we took no action?
Well, I mean, it would depend upon the pleasure of the committee. I mean, so if it is that you guys meet as a committee and based upon whatever decision the committee makes, that it would like to make some kind of recommendation to the full board, then it can. So, I mean, I don't think that you need to predetermine what you will or will not do at the next committee meeting.
You mean today? No, I meant today.
Oh, I'm sorry, today.
I was just a little confused. So
I
think what we're going to be doing is taking no action but agreeing to meet in the future. And that would be just a report to the full board.
And I apologize. I thought you meant at your next meeting.
And maybe I misunderstood what you were saying before.
Basically, what I asked John to do, Governor Temple to do, because he had an interest in possibly having it considered in the full board, was to at least express his position, or have all members express their position during the committee meeting so we know where we are. And then based upon that, after Governor Martin makes his report to the full board, if there were some concern about maybe taking some action at that point, at least I'd know the position of the parties and we could make some determination. However, I know that Governor Temple was probably most vocal in having the full board consider it and possibly even make a determination up or down at that point. I think from hearing Governor Temple's comments this morning, he is somewhat open to the fact that if the Strategic Planning Committee would like to consider the proposals further, that he has kind of expressed where he is and doesn't have any opposition. So what I anticipate is going to happen at this point is that I am not going to entertain, I will not very likely entertain any other positions from the board about killing the proposals in the full board meeting, but that will allow the position of the committee, if the Strategic Planning Committee would like to further consider them, that we would likely move forward with that. Governor Temple?
Yeah, I think you stated that accurately. That's how I feel. But I think we got to have closure at some point, and I think the next board meeting, I would hope that the that the Strategic Planning Committee would come in with a recommendation and we would take an action. Because I think we owe that to the people that are requesting us to consider this.
So procedurally, Chairman Martin, is that I anticipate that the Strategic Planning Committee will report out and the full board will not take any action on whatever the report is from the committee other than receiving it.
Okay, very good. Governor Hussaini?
Mr. Chairman, I totally agree with everyone that we need to give him an opportunity to go back and perhaps come up with a plan that works. I think we owe it to them. They worked very hard to get here. This hasn't started just yesterday. As I know for at least 1 year that I've been hearing about this. There are people giving $10 million. We've got the mayor of city coming here to us and for them to go to their council, get permission to give $5 million. At least we owe it to them to give them the full due process that they're due. I think President Machen is asking a question that basically he's saying, are you serious? I mean, are you serious, or are you just trying to just pass the time, pass the buck? Dr. Machen, I am serious. I'm serious in for you guys to come up, smartest brains, in this room. You would think that you all come up with the great programs that benefit our state and our students. And we, as the board, really appreciate, when you all come out with a plan, we say, darn, that really looks great. We really don't have to The last thing somebody wants to say is no, but as a fiduciary, we are responsible to make sure that things are get done right. So I am for also give them the opportunity to come back to this committee.
Governor Frost.
I'd also like to know two things. One, how much money is it going to cost to upgrade your school? I think that's important to know, because we've all talked about buildings falling down and so forth. So I think that's an important issue, and that's in another category altogether, but that's a realistic thing where if we upgrade one existing school right now, upgrade meaning that the roof is not leaking and that you have more lab space and et cetera, and maybe you can accommodate a half a dozen or a dozen more students, I think we need to know that. And the second thing is, I guess as you all heard, if we did take a vote today, it probably would have all been turned down. We talked about clinical areas. You know, it's just like in medicine. We approved medical schools, and we're still waiting to make sure that all of our medical schools have residency programs that are appropriate and where someone will be board certified when they're finished. And we need to know that if a young student is in a deprived area and he's working with a dentist who may be not quite trained to actually work with that young student, what's going to happen after he spends all that money going to school? Is he really going to be qualified to be the dentist? And are all those little clinics that you're talking about in your plan really viable clinics for someone to go to learn? So I think, as I stated before, if I were voting today, it would be voting no. But I'd like to know how much it's going to cost us, and also, really, are those realistic clinics? I mean, it sounds great, but I'm not so sure that every dentist who's barely making a living is going to give up half of his time to help 4 students learn how to be a dentist. So that's my only comment.
Chancellor Brogan.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm very sensitive to what President Machen said earlier. Having sat over there, I think the worst thing you can do is leave a room and wonder, what are we supposed to do? So to digress a little bit, I remind people that the presentations we heard today were not a response to an RFP put out by the Board of Governors. These were requests coming from institutions who have made decisions regarding need or needs to be fulfilled and potential solutions to be utilized to fulfill those needs. And that's different. And so you run the risk of 2 things here. You run the risk of either sending them away with a potential of a Lucy in the football approach to this, which is that they go away, come back again with something, and the answer is still no, you didn't get it right again. Or you run the risk of ultimately then doing something that you may not really feel you need to do at the end of the day, or at least being asked to consider it. And I'm really sensitive to that point. I've listened to this good conversation now for yesterday and today, and the clarity of what I'm hearing today is that all things being equal right this minute, it sounds to me the majority of the board members would say no to everybody. So then the next question becomes, you didn't make your case on need, and you didn't make your case on solution to those needs, whether the needs are underserved rural populations, minority numbers, economic development. So then the next question is, how do you send 3 institutions away from this room and say, come up with something that will clearly define the need and clearly define the solutions to those needs, and we will consider that. So the issue of clarity here becomes really very important, lest we do this for another month and come back again and still, as many appears just from listening, don't even believe that there is a need. And I'm not talking about underserved rural populations. I think everybody agrees that that is an issue in the state of Florida. Who's responsible for resolving it is another issue, but I think everybody understands that one. The diversity issue, it's clear. I mean, it's a numbers thing. You look at the numbers, you can see it for yourself. But the whole issue of something as huge as creating a dental school to turn out more dentists in hopes that by utilizing that gargantuan approach, we can at the same time solve some of these other issues is a bit in reverse, I think, of what it ought to be. I don't know, and winding up, I don't know if you can provide these folks the clarity they need because, again, I suppose the onus is almost on them to say, we brought these things to you in the first place, both need or needs and resolution to needs. Therefore, the best we can do is now all get in a room and see if we can come together on what the needs are and what the collaborative solutions to those needs are. I don't envy them that because based on the presentations, much of this is in the eye of the beholder, and therefore the solutions to it become in the eye of the beholder. Now, I will tell you this, what I'm going to do between now and the time we come back together again is continue to reach out to the other folks in the state of Florida who do own this problem. And I agree with the president. The state university system has proudly stood up to the plate forever on important issues of community engagement to help reconcile problems that we face in the state of Florida, or the country or the world for that matter. We'll continue to do that. But I think that's different than recognizing, as I said yesterday, that this is not in itself a state university problem, and then therefore the solutions to the problem don't belong to the state university. We are a partner here. And oftentimes we react to issues that are presented to us by those who are responsible for those issues directly. So I'm going to continue to work with the Department of Health, with the legislature and others, because again, I'm not trying to give this away. We do dental education, so we're in the game on this one. We do rural outreach. We're in the game on this one. We educate minority students to be dentists. We're in the game on this one. I just want to make sure as we send these good people out the door that A, we're not sending them out with a belief that all they've got to do is now do the same thing they just did but do it together, come back and everything's going to be fine. But at the same time, realize that if we look at the needs and if we find some collaborative and creative solutions to the needs, depending on how you calibrate what those needs are, that we're not shutting down the conversation about the possibilities for the future. So I will stop by saying I'm not sure that you can provide the clarity this moment on what you expect them to bring back here in several weeks. I don't know if it's possible to do that based on the conversations that we've had.
Okay, Governor Beard and then Governor Parker.
Yeah, let me just say, I mean, I don't think that we're going to find out anything in the next 30 days that's going to change the state of the economy, the fact that the board doesn't have any money, the state doesn't have any money, the PICO funds are gone. So, I mean, to me, it's those big picture issues that we're dealing with here. We just don't have the financial resources to enter into these great programs at this time. It's really a question of timing. And so with this board not taking a vote at this point in time or later in the day, I think it's really a disservice to the three universities. They're going to go out and spend 30 more days working on a problem that doesn't have a fix. All the little details aren't going to make these proposals any better. So, I mean, I just think even though I'm not on the committee, I continue to believe just kicking it down the road 30 days isn't going to buy us anything.
And I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, but I just want to make it clear, I'm not attempting to derail the extra month.
Well,
not at all.
Either.
2 months.
No, I know you're not. I just want to make that clear. I'm just trying to frame it a la the issue that the President brought up, and it's a good one, about what the expectations are over the course of the next few weeks.
Okay, Governor Tripp, Temple, then Parker. Governor Tripp.
I guess my gut feeling is, and I may not like myself after saying this, but let me just see what I think happened. A train got going down the track, and everybody realized that had an interest in maybe a dental school or improving a dental school, that we better get on that train. And so all of a sudden, we now have competing interests. I was satisfied before that there was no crying need in this state at this point in time for the university system or the legislature to put a high priority on building more dental schools. UCF just had an opportunity. That's how I view it. I don't believe that they would be here if somebody hadn't walked up with $10 million and said, you know, I want to be in the business, I want to do this. It is an opportunity, but it's the wrong timing for us. And while yes, I believe that at the end of the day, it would fit well with the medical city they're trying to put together there. It's just not the right time and the right thing. There's no question that if we really, as a system, feel that we need more dentists and we need more diversity in dentists, we should be working with the University of Florida to increase the numbers there, since the school is already in place, it's qualified, it is well thought of, and if that is our issue, diversity and more dentists, then we should be, as a board, trying to figure out how we can improve what we already have. As far as FAMU is considered, I understand what they're trying to do, and I believe that their heart is in the right place. But we've got the same issue. If the state can't afford to put up programs that will bring dentists into these rural areas to serve the people, and make it worth their while to do that, I don't know how we get any better by putting money out on a maybe. We think this will work. There are some models that say it'll work. But I agree with what Pat said over here, that, you know, I'm not sure that given the circumstances in Florida, that teaching model is the most cost-efficient way for us to go forward. So I really think at the end of the day, I agree with Dick. This may be one of our hardest decisions, but I don't see a crying need for us to get down this road. We have two public, apparently we have one clearly going private and another one coming. That is where we should be putting our energy at this point.
Mr. Chairman.
Governor Temple?
Yeah. Let me just respond to Dick. I mean, I feel the same way you do, but we do have some governors here who want to spend, it's really not 30 days, it's really like 2 months. And I hope we don't spend a lot of money on that. But if they need more time, we got to give them more time. I agree with all the other comments I've heard. I don't see a need. I think there's some opportunities at University of Florida. I don't know if you were here, President Machin, when I commented that if we have an opportunity, I got the sense we got an opportunity to raise our tuition. We could take some of those dollars and help with our diversity issue, or add some more dentists. I think that's something I'd like to hear more about. I think we know what it costs. I think you made a very good presentation on that. So that's the reason I'm saying, okay, next meeting. But I think I think we have to have closure at the next meeting, and I think.
Governor Parker, then Governor Rood.
I work with the committee chair on calendaring or putting this issue, on the agenda, because I thought it was important that we have the conversation and that we provide some direction to the universities, because it was clear they had an interest in presenting a request for a new degree program at their institutions and or expanding an existing degree program. it was evident by some of the LBR requests that we received that was an interest. So I thought it was important that we have the conversation early on to provide some direction about how the board kind of sees this issue. In response to Bernie's question, that is, what is it that you like to see? I think there are a couple of questions that should be answered in the next 60 days or so. I think that if we look at this, the proposals are addressing very different issues. And I think that what the University of Central Florida should do, or what I suggest, John, is that the whole idea of market rate tuition is a very new concept for the board to wrap around. I know that TICO spent last summer working around the issue, and we've approved some guidelines that relate to market rate tuition. But I think this is the first big proposal where we've seen this whole market rate tuition issue. So I think that in order for this board to wrap its hands around it, it has to kind of better understand how it is that you're driving your proposal with this relatively new concept. And so I think that the fact that even that we've kind of come to a conclusion about it, but folks are still saying, we don't have that yet, kind of says that the board as a whole kind of has not gotten used to the idea, and maybe they need to make sure that we're ready for that and that we're going to move forward with this proposal, because it has a different set of standards. I mean, you don't look at the traditional need issues when you're dealing with the market rate program. I mean, it's almost like we're saying yes to a university, testing its proposal, and let's see if the market can bear it. And I think that as a board, we have to decide whether, since we have a market rate tuition concept in place, are we ready to move forward with it based upon the proposal that UCF has presented? So for us to sit back and say, we think it's too much money, or we think that, it's unfair to charge that type of tuition, keep in mind that's not the standard that we kind of have in place for this type of proposal. So I think that what you should do, in my opinion, in the next 60 days is to kind of get the boards wrapped around the concept of whether we think that model should work for a new dental program, and remind us of the fact that we have standards in place for market rate, but are we ready to allow a university to take that kind of risk? And I think so that's something I'd be interested in. I think that ensuring the board that it's a good risk for us to take is probably the best thing I think that you can do in that period. I think the idea of working with a University of Florida is a good idea because we have an existing program, and any way we can leverage existing resources, if there's a way to collaborate, I think that also is a good idea. As it relates to the proposal from Dr. Ammons, I think that it's a good idea to kind of have more details as it relates to how those local communities and those local clinics are going to help fund it. Because I think that everyone, can buy into the numbers that we don't have dentists in rural areas, but it's connecting the dots. And is it that by creating more dentists in your program that we're actually going to be able to resolve that issue? And I think that there's ways that you do the best you can to show how it's something that by having more dentists and a new dental school that we can meet that need, and then the board can determine whether that model is going to produce the results that you believe that it will based upon your experience in underserved areas and with minority populations. So I think if you can bring more clarity on that issue, I think it'll be easier for the board to make a determination about whether to support the model that you've presented. What I'd ask you to do, Mr. Chairman, is that I know that you have a pretty full agenda, that if other members have different ideas of things that they have to respond to Dr. Matchen's question about what they're looking for, if you could take some time today to do that, I'd appreciate it. But it looks like you have a consensus on at least the idea of having your committee further review this issue, and I'd ask if you guys could come back with a recommendation in November. Then that would be my request from you as a board chair, so that we can kind of wrap our hands around it with an end date in mind.
Okay. Governor Root?
Okay, I think we know where everybody is on this, and I'd like to move that we defer action until the next meeting of the Strategic Planning Committee.
Second.
Okay.
Just part of the discussion, Dr. Machen, you're able Dean yesterday brought up something interesting. It was on the area of specialties. You may want to look at that area. From what I heard from her is that just that the growth in that area seems to be something is needed for the state. You know, I mean, we may have a lot of dentists, but on the specializing area, it seems that that area something needs to be looked at. Thank you.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we delay and have the committee to come back to the board in November. And during the time between now and then, we will ask the Strategic Planning Committee, we will have a meeting at some point, either the day prior to the next board meeting or sometime prior to the next meeting. I will ask that the universities reach out to all the committee members and other members of the board to make sure that they clearly understand the content of your proposals. There have been a number of questions been raised today in terms of the cost, so be mindful of that. Also, collaboration. Yesterday it was mentioned that a number of you have talked to each other about some type of joint proposal, if you will. Between now and then, we would encourage you very seriously to have those discussions. So when you do come back to us, we'll have that information as well. So that seems to be the consensus. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Okay. Motion carries. All righty. The other two items on our agenda for today, one is strategic planning, and that's going to be a very short and brief presentation, and then we get into the USF Polytech. Passed out between the committee meetings, you have this one sheet here, which identifies on one side the mission, vision, and the guiding principles. We're not really going to take the time to really go through that. But this is what the Strategic Planning Committee came up with. We met in late August, spent about 4 hours in Orlando. It was a very, very good meeting. We heard the comments from the board from the June meeting. I think we've addressed a lot of those comments in identifying now what we perceive to be the vision for the strategic plan. We now have the overall framework to get started. It is the intent to have a draft document for the November meeting. So staff is going to get very, very busy in working with the various committees. So what I would ask Dr. Manier to do is just focus on today very briefly. We heard from the members from the previous meeting that they wanted to see action. They wanted to know exactly what can we do now to move things forward. As a part of this process, a lot of our committees will be involved in certain components of the strategic planning process. So I would just kind of focus on that, and then basically we're ready to move forward to really drive this process forward so we can have a draft plan for the board in November. Dr. Manier.
Thank you, Governor Martin. At the August meeting, you'll remember that we focused the strategic planning discussions regarding the vision and subsequent goals for the system around three framing concepts: preeminence, competitiveness, and strategic priorities. When we placed these three concepts up against the traditional tripartite mission for the universities of teaching and research and service, we really came up with these kind of 9 zones or these 9 categories of directional goals. And it will be these that we'll use as the staff is going forward and actually drafting out a plan for your consideration. But as Governor Martin indicated, there were a number of members who really expressed an interest in moving on some things right away. And it's actually happening. And what we've just wanted to do was pause for a moment and check in with committee members and committee chairs from the other committees to see if we're capturing these and how they line up with the categories that have been delineated, and whether there are other actions that need to be taken or other decisions that need to be made. On Monday, the Legislative Committee met via conference call and considered a range of recommended actions intended to demonstrate the commitment of the board and the system to really leveraging the resources to strengthen Florida economy through building a new Florida economy. The members of that committee, and I'll ask Governor Colson when he comes back if there's anything that he would like to add. But in the document thank you, Governor Colson. In the document considered by the Legislative Committee, there was a real focus on increasing the abilities of universities to drive the knowledge and innovation economy by looking at several proposed improvements that are designed to have a greater impact on STEM. That would be your far right-hand shaded one, having to do with strategic priorities, working on increasing research productivity overall. That would be your competitiveness in the scholarship, research, and innovation category. Do we have yeah. Thank you. This will help a little bit. As well as just increasing research. Okay. Hit this screen, this back. Is this the easiest for you? Okay. Research overall, again, focusing in more specifically on STEM and other areas of strategic emphasis. Additionally, we want to make sure that we're focusing our efforts to continue to improve the quality and reputation of the Florida institutions and their programs relative to other states. The Facilities Committee met yesterday. Again, Governor Beard has been very vocal about making sure that we're paying attention to the increased needs to be able to accommodate more students in our system, and whether or not we're going to have the facilities to be able to reach this goal of increasing the number of degreed adults in our state, as well as making sure we have the research facilities in the state. So you'll see that we're, again, hitting on more of the different components from this particular model. The Budget and Finance Committee yesterday, Governor Perez introduced a legislative budget request that had a New Florida initiative in it. You will remember that there were two buckets of money that were under consideration. One of them, again, focused specifically on the increase in STEM degrees and degrees in other areas of strategic emphasis, as well as increasing retention and graduation rate, which will hit the competitive cycle, as well as working to increase research and commercialization across the state. So again, we're beginning to get a lot of activities in place to be able to move forward right away without waiting for the final plan to be created. In the Academic and Student Affairs Committee meeting this morning, Governor Duncan led a discussion having to do with adult students who wanted to return to complete their baccalaureate programs. Again, this is one of the ways, one of the strategies that's under consideration for being able to increase the number of degrees awarded in our system. She also mentioned the work that she is continuing to do with the Council of Academic Vice Presidents relative to the coordination and continued strengthening of our academic programs, and making sure that we're making the right kind of decisions to ensure that we have the array of degree programs to meet the needs in the STEM areas and other areas of strategic emphasis. The Strategic Planning Committee last month had a very interesting discussion about preeminence, about college rankings, about the rankings of programs, making sure that we're paying attention to how our institutions are doing relative to the quality of their academic programs, as well as their research activity and their community engagement activity. Strategic Plan has also continued to work on making sure that we're addressing ways to increase, maximize resource utilization to increase our productivity in each of these areas. I point out this area because at the meeting last month, there was some discussion and actually a little bit of confusion about the public service and community engagement. I just wanted to make members of the committee aware that one of the things that Governors Martin and Rood had asked staff to do was to go through the individual strategic plans for each of the 11 institutions and look for some of the commonalities and some of the special points brought out in their own strategic priorities. Many of them do have very specific goals related to public service and community engagement. And at the request of the chair, staff will work to bring back to you, working with our university colleagues, some examples of exactly what kinds of metrics in this array under the public service and community engagement arena would be worthy of consideration in the system strategic plan. So, Governor Martin, we've got certainly activity in each of the committees that cover all of the areas that we've talked about relative to this particular framing of a strategic plan, but just wanted to pause and give you an opportunity to ask if there were other areas that needed attention or that we needed to focus on.
Okay, very good. Governor Duncan.
I know I'm not on your committee and it's not pertinent to the plan, but I think this is maybe Dottie's last meeting here as a staff person supporting all of this, right? Is that the timing correct? So I wanted to say, as a board member, you have just rocked. You've been amazing, and you've given us so much guidance and support, and all of this, even not as a committee member, but the other committees that you support. Thank you very much for all you've been doing.
Okay, any other comments from any committee members? Again, I would just like to echo what Governor Duncan said. I think that you've been a tremendous resource to the system and the board. It'll be our loss, but still you're not going too far over in the Panhandle. And I see President Pence is just smiling like, I can't wait till she starts, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Governor Martin?
Yes.
One follow-up from yesterday, and I'm sorry Governor Husseini's not at the table because I will provide this.
There he is.
He's running.
You keep doing that to us, Dottie.
This is my last meeting, what can I say?
Last meeting, huh?
Both last month, and Governor Parker, I think you had some concerns about the way we were presenting some of the information relative to how the state university system stacked up relative to other public university systems in the country. And Jason's been kind enough to pull together a few slides for us this morning just to clarify our discussion yesterday about STEM production at each of the levels. One of the things you have to be really careful about when you're talking about the state university system in relationship to other public university systems, some states have more than one public university system. So you have to be careful whether you're comparing systems or you're comparing all of the public university activity in one state to another. So, for instance, do we compare Florida to the State University System of Florida to the Cal State system and the University of California system, or do we compare public university activity in Florida to public university activity in California? I just wanted to clarify that. This points out that situation. This is actually the number of degrees awarded, the number of graduates in the top 10 public university systems. You'll notice that in 2008-9, University of California system is first, Cal State system second, and State University system is third. And then the other systems that make up the top 10 as far as the actual number of degrees awarded in the STEM areas. The same pattern holds true for master's degrees, and the same pattern holds true for doctoral degrees, with the state university system being the third system as far as ranking. But if you do it in terms of states, all of the public university activity in states, we fall to fourth in both of those categories. So if you say, well, we're compared to California and other systems, other states, we're fourth, but if you talk of systems, we're third. That's the number of degrees that are awarded. But you'll notice on the grid that we've been working on, in that last column, we've been talking about the proportion of our degrees that are in the STEM fields and other areas of strategic emphasis. So if you look at the percentage of all of the degrees that we award that happen to be in STEM fields from those same 10 university systems that I just had up on the screen, then we actually fall down to 9th out of the 10 at the baccalaureate level, stay there for the graduate degrees as well. So it's a matter of whether you're talking the actual the number of degrees we're awarding, or the proportion of all of our degrees that happen to be in the STEM fields. Third in the overall number, but with the proportion of our degrees, we fall down to 9th.
Okay, thank you. Governor Hussain?
Well, but isn't this what we should focus?
And that's the way we framed the strategic plan, was we actually talked in that last column of the grid, we talked about increasing the proportion of our degrees that are actually in the STEM fields or other areas of strategic emphasis. So yes.
Exactly, and so we're number 9 out of 10, and if you have the top 25, we're number 21 out of 25. All the same, we're in the bottom, percentile of the total number of universities. So I think that's the areas, that we really need to focus. Do you agree with that?
I think that that's a policy decision for the board, whether you want to just be increasing degrees in all areas, which will not necessarily change your proportions, or whether you purposefully want to and strategically make sure that more emphasis is being placed on STEM fields and other areas of strategic emphasis.
Have you ever done a study about jobs? When our students graduate from STEM degrees, where do they get more jobs or other degrees?
We can access some of that information through a system of data that are available through the Department of Education. We'll be glad to pull together the information relative to an array of degrees. However, there are some caveats, some cautions relative to, particularly at the baccalaureate level, of associating particular degrees with particular jobs. But we'll go ahead and package that up, and I'll make sure that staff bring that to you at the next meeting.
And then also what salaries?
Yes. That information is there.
What salaries they get to hire.
And again, there will be some caveats. There are some concerns there are some issues relative to data not being a direct connection between degrees and the categorization of jobs, but we'll go through that.
Governor Colson.
I have a couple comments. I think this is very good work, Dottie. Thank you. It seems to me that we're going to have a lot of pressure on our state universities to produce a larger quantity of baccalaureates. And that's why it's really important that it can't originate from here, that we work with the state college system in this effort, because if we focus too much on quantity, it's going to ultimately, because there's not enough money, affect quality. And one of the things I want to applaud Dottie and the Chancellor for is the focus on quality in the strategic plan, because I think that is one of the legs of the stool. And if we're not good at what we do, we're really not getting a whole lot done. So there's a role here for the state college system, and that communication needs to start right away, and that coordination needs to start right away. It's one of the things I think that's listed in here in the priorities, but I think it's critical going forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Governor Hussain.
I totally agree. I mean, we really need to look at this. Where does our state dollars spend better? We create 35% in management or business. Are we better off to maybe lower that and increase in STEM? I think that's a great question for us to look at, and start laser beaming on the degrees that we want that brings in more jobs to our state.
Very good. All those are very good comments, and again, the process is very fluid as we go forward. Again, I'd like to thank staff for all the hard work that you've already done, and Dottie as you leave, but for the remaining staff that is now have that baton in their hand to drive the process forward. And we encourage everyone to stay tuned as we go forward. Okay. Any other comments on strategic planning?